Good morning, everyone. We've all met them. Maybe they're a colleague, a family member, or even a friend. The person who seems to make everything about themselves, whose words can sting, and who leaves us questioning our worth. It's hard, isn't it? Dealing with narcissistic people can feel like an emotional minefield. When we think of kindness, we often imagine gestures of generosity, words of encouragement, or acts of compassion. But kindness isn't always about being accommodating or putting others first. Sometimes kindness is about standing firm in our own truth, saying no when necessary, and creating the space to protect what matters most to us. Boundaries are an essential part of that kindness. They are the lines we draw around ourselves to safeguard our physical, emotional, and mental well-being. Boundaries are a way of communicating to others, this is what I need to feel safe, respected, and valued. Now let's talk about why this is especially important when dealing with narcissistic individuals. Boundaries protect our peace. Narcissistic people often have a tendency to take, manipulate, and overstep the limits of others without regard for their feelings. This might look like demanding attention, disregarding your needs, or trying to control your actions. At the core of this behavior, narcissists often lack the ability or the willingness to recognize the impact of their actions on others. This is where boundaries become essential. Boundaries aren't just about saying no to the bad stuff, they're about saying yes to our own needs. They are a declaration that our inner peace and sense of self-worth are non-negotiable. When we set boundaries, we are choosing to protect our emotional and mental well-being from being depleted or manipulated. Without boundaries, we risk being swept up in their emotional storm and losing ourselves in the process. By setting clear boundaries, we not only prevent others from taking advantage of us, but we also give ourselves the space to breathe, think, and heal. We create a space for calm and balance to remain in our lives. Boundaries are an act of self-respect. Setting boundaries is a form of self-respect. When we refuse to tolerate disrespect or manipulative behavior, we are affirming that we deserve to be treated with dignity. We're saying that we are worthy of love, kindness, and consideration, not because of anything we do for others, but because we are human beings deserving of those things by virtue of our existence. For example, if a narcissistic person repeatedly belittles or invalidates you, it can be difficult to confront them. The fear of conflict, rejection, or escalation often holds us back. However, when we stand firm in our boundaries, whether it's by saying, "That's not an acceptable way to speak to me," or choosing not to engage with behavior that feels degrading, or asserting that we will not allow others to treat us in a way that compromises our self-respect. Narcissistic individuals often test boundaries because they don't inherently recognize or care about them. But by setting boundaries, we are teaching them and ourselves that we value ourselves too much to let others disrespect us. In fact, the act of setting a boundary is a reflection of the respect we have for our own worth. It's an affirmation that our needs matter just as much as anyone else's. Boundaries are a form of protection for both parties. Here's a common misconception. People often assume that setting boundaries is a selfish act, one that might hurt the other person or create distance. But in reality, boundaries can actually protect both individuals involved in a relationship. When we fail to set boundaries with a narcissistic person, we allow their behavior to dictate the dynamics of the relationship. We might end up tolerating things we don't agree with, feeling drained, or constantly being on the defensive. This not only harms us, but also enables them to continue behaving in ways that may be damaging to both parties. Narcissistic people can often function in a cycle where they overstep, receive no resistance, and continue to push limits. They may even begin to take us for granted or expect our compliance without recognizing the emotional toll on us. Setting boundaries interrupts this cycle. It allows the narcissistic person to see where the line is and hopefully reconsider their behavior. While it may be uncomfortable at first, establishing boundaries can lead to a healthier dynamic in the relationship. If the narcissistic person chooses not to respect those boundaries, the responsibility then lies with them, not us. We can maintain our peace and we're no longer caught in the exhausting reactive cycle of trying to please them or avoid conflict. In some cases, boundaries might even help the narcissistic person grow, as it gives them an opportunity to reflect on their behavior. It's unlikely to lead to drastic change right away, but setting boundaries is still a compassionate act. It shows that you care enough about both your well-being and the possibility of a healthier interaction to take a stand. Boundaries are about saying yes to ourselves. Often when we think of boundaries, we only think of what we're saying no to, but boundaries are just as much about what we're saying yes to. By setting boundaries, we're saying yes to our own needs, to self-care, to our emotional health, and to our right to live in a way that feels true to ourselves. For example, setting a boundary with a narcissistic person might involve saying yes to time away from their negativity and manipulation. It's about saying, I need space to recharge, or I need to prioritize my own well-being over maintaining a toxic interaction. When we honor ourselves by setting these boundaries, we're giving ourselves the opportunity to live authentically and with intention. Boundaries empower us to take control of our lives and our energy, ensuring that we don't lose ourselves in the process of trying to please or appease someone else. It's about taking back our time, our mental space, and our emotional energy so we can use them in ways that nourish us rather than drain us. Conclusion: boundaries are not walls, they are bridges. Remember, boundaries are not walls meant to shut people out. They are bridges that keep us grounded in who we truly are. They help us connect with ourselves and others in ways that are healthy, respectful, and loving. By setting clear, firm boundaries with narcissistic people, we are demonstrating the deepest form of kindness, not only toward ourselves, but also toward the potential for more authentic and balanced relationships in the future. So next time you're faced with a situation where you need to set a boundary, remember this: you are not being selfish or unkind. You are taking a courageous, loving step to protect your peace, your worth, and your emotional well-being. And that, my friends, is kindness in action. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments or if there's anything else you'd like to explore. Compassion is one of the most beautiful human qualities we can cultivate. It is the ability to recognize the suffering of others, to feel for them, and to extend kindness and understanding. But here's a misconception that often arises: compassion is not synonymous with tolerance, especially when it comes to harmful behaviors. When we are faced with a narcissistic person, the idea of being compassionate can become complicated. We might feel torn between understanding the underlying causes of their behavior, perhaps their own pain, insecurities, or wounds, and the reality that their actions are often hurtful, manipulative, and even abusive. It can leave us wondering, can we still be compassionate while refusing to tolerate harmful actions? The answer is unequivocally yes. Compassion doesn't mean we have to accept or tolerate behavior that undermines our well-being, our values, or our dignity. In fact, true compassion for both ourselves and others requires us to protect ourselves from destructive patterns of behavior. Let's take a deeper look at how compassion and tolerance are distinct, and why it's important to understand this difference. Understanding the difference between compassion and tolerance. Compassion involves understanding and empathy. It's about recognizing that the person in front of us is more than their actions. Narcissism often stems from deep-seated pain, childhood trauma, or unmet emotional needs. While we may acknowledge this, we don't have to tolerate the consequences of their behavior, especially if it harms us or others. Tolerance, on the other hand, means accepting something we don't agree with or approve of, often at the cost of our own well-being. Tolerance can sometimes lead to enabling bad behavior because we fear conflict or want to keep the peace. But when we tolerate things that go against our values, like manipulation, disrespect, or emotional abuse, we are, in essence, accepting that behavior as something we will allow in our lives. Compassion encourages understanding and a desire for healing, but tolerance risks normalizing harmful behavior that erodes our sense of self-worth. Compassion says, I understand that you're suffering, but I will not accept behavior that harms me. Tolerance says, I will accept this behavior, even though it's harmful, because I don't want to rock the boat. Compassion doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. When dealing with narcissistic people, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that in order to be compassionate, we must endure their behavior. We might feel responsible for fixing them or believe that if we show enough kindness, they will change. This mindset is rooted in the desire to be kind, to help, and to heal. But we must remember that compassion doesn't require us to sacrifice our own mental health or emotional well-being. Being compassionate doesn't mean staying in a relationship that is toxic or emotionally damaging. It doesn't mean constantly giving someone the benefit of the doubt when they've repeatedly shown you that they don't respect your boundaries. Compassion involves recognizing the humanity in others without allowing them to hurt us or diminish our self-worth in the process. For instance, when a narcissistic person belittles you or disregards your feelings, showing compassion doesn't mean tolerating their hurtful behavior. It means recognizing that their actions may be rooted in deep insecurity or unresolved pain, while also acknowledging that their behavior is not acceptable. Compassion allows you to respond with empathy, while maintaining the strength to set boundaries and protect yourself from further harm. Compassion means understanding, not enabling. We often confuse compassion with enabling harmful behavior. This happens when we excuse a narcissist's actions because we feel sorry for them or believe that they can't help themselves. It's important to recognize that compassion doesn't mean turning a blind eye to destructive actions or making excuses for someone's cruelty. In fact, enabling narcissistic behavior only perpetuates the cycle of harm. Compassion allows us to see the person for who they are, but it doesn't give us permission to overlook or tolerate their toxic actions. We may understand that their narcissism is a result of past trauma or unaddressed emotional pain, but we still have a responsibility to protect ourselves from their harmful behavior. Consider the difference between empathizing with a person and enabling them. Empathy allows us to feel for someone and acknowledge their pain, but enabling someone means that we make excuses for them and allow them to continue hurting others without consequence. True compassion is about providing support from a place of strength, not from a place of weakness or acquiescence. Compassion and boundaries are not opposing forces, they are two sides of the same coin. The most compassionate thing you can do for someone, especially a narcissistic person, is to set healthy boundaries that protect your well-being. Without boundaries, compassion can quickly turn into self-sacrifice, and you may find yourself constantly giving and giving with little to no return. This ultimately leads to burnout, resentment, and a depletion of your emotional resources. Setting boundaries is a clear expression of self-compassion. It's a way of saying, I care enough about myself to not allow harmful behavior in my life. Boundaries are not walls that shut others out, they are the lines that keep our emotional and mental space intact, allowing us to engage in relationships in a healthy, sustainable way. They give us the emotional room to extend compassion without draining ourselves in the process. For example, if a narcissistic person constantly demands your time and attention, showing compassion doesn't mean letting them control your schedule. It means understanding that their needs are real, but that you have the right to say, I need time for myself. It means creating space for yourself so you can continue to be a source of support for others without feeling overwhelmed or taken advantage of. When you begin to practice compassion, it's essential to remember that self-care is a vital component of it. Compassion for others does not require the depletion of your own energy. In fact, to show true compassion, you must first take care of yourself. Only when we are strong and emotionally balanced can we extend compassion to others in a meaningful, healthy way. Self-care allows us to recharge, reflect, and reconnect with our values. When we neglect self-care in the name of compassion, we risk becoming overwhelmed, resentful, and emotionally drained. In a relationship with a narcissistic person, this often means that you're putting their needs above your own, which is not sustainable. It's essential to understand that taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's necessary for long-term well-being and for being able to show up in a meaningful, loving way for others. In summary, compassion is one of the most powerful forces in the world, but it doesn't mean tolerating harmful, toxic, or manipulative behavior. Compassion is about recognizing the suffering of others without allowing that suffering to become an excuse for mistreatment. It's about understanding someone's pain while still holding them accountable for their actions. By practicing compassion, we can allow space for growth, understanding, and empathy without compromising our own boundaries, mental health, or dignity. Compassion for others starts with compassion for ourselves, and this means knowing when to protect ourselves from harm and when to offer support in a way that is healthy and sustainable for everyone involved. I hope this expansion helps clarify the nuanced relationship between compassion and tolerance. Let me know if you'd like further elaboration or adjustments. One of the most difficult truths we can face in relationships with narcissistic individuals is the realization that we cannot fix, save, or heal them. This is particularly hard when we feel empathy for them, especially if we recognize that their narcissism may stem from deep wounds, past trauma, or unmet needs. The desire to help or heal others, especially people we care about, is a natural and admirable impulse. But it's crucial to understand that their healing is not our responsibility. Let's explore why this is such an important distinction, especially when dealing with narcissistic people, and why learning to release this burden is essential for our own well-being. Narcissistic people often behave in ways that can be hurtful, manipulative, self-centered, or even dismissive of your feelings. Yet, despite these behaviors, you may still feel empathy for them. You may sense the underlying vulnerability that fuels their actions, knowing that they likely carry unresolved emotional wounds. This empathy can lead to a powerful desire to help them change or heal. Perhaps you see glimpses of a person who is not just narcissistic, but also hurt and in need of support. You may think that if you just provide enough attention, validation, or care, they'll open up and finally change their ways. This is a deeply human impulse, the wish to heal those we love. However, it's vital to recognize the limitations of this mindset. While empathy is essential in understanding others, it is not the same as taking responsibility for their emotional growth. Healing requires a willingness to face one's issues, to engage in self-awareness, and often to seek professional help. And while you can support someone in their journey, you cannot do the work for them. Healing is a deeply personal process that must come from within the individual. It cannot be imposed or forced by others. Narcissistic individuals may not always acknowledge the harm they cause or take responsibility for their actions. In fact, many narcissists are often unaware of or unwilling to confront their behaviors and the impact they have on others. Instead, they may shift the blame onto others, gaslight you, or play the victim. This makes it even more challenging to help them. Here's the hard truth: no matter how much love or care you offer, a narcissistic person can only heal if they are ready and willing to do the inner work themselves. This might involve confronting painful truths, accepting responsibility for their actions, and engaging in therapy or other forms of personal growth. Until they are ready to embark on that journey, no amount of your time, energy, or sacrifice will be enough to force that change. Recognizing your limits is not a sign of weakness, it's an act of self-preservation. You have the right to protect your own emotional health. If you continuously pour energy into trying to heal someone who is not receptive to it or unwilling to change, you risk burning out. The emotional cost of constantly trying to fix someone else is immense, and it can deplete you, leaving you with little energy for your own growth and well-being. It's easy to confuse supporting someone with enabling them, especially when that person is struggling with emotional issues or past trauma. Enabling occurs when we unintentionally encourage someone to continue in unhealthy behaviors, either by excusing them or tolerating them in the name of compassion. With narcissistic people, enabling might look like excusing manipulative behavior, making excuses for their lack of empathy, or continually forgiving them without holding them accountable. Supporting, on the other hand, involves offering encouragement and understanding while still holding the person accountable for their actions. It means recognizing that their healing process is not your responsibility, but offering kindness when they are open to it and providing emotional support when it is appropriate. The key difference is in your approach. Enabling is passive, while supporting is active, but also mindful of boundaries. You can support someone by offering empathy or encouraging them to seek help, but you must never sacrifice your own emotional health or accept toxic behavior simply to help them. When we take on the responsibility for someone else's healing, we also take on the burden of their emotional struggles. This is particularly true in relationships with narcissistic people, where the imbalance of emotional labor is often profound. Narcissists may not acknowledge the toll they are taking on you, as they may be so focused on their own needs and desires that they overlook the impact of their behavior on others. Over time, if you continue to carry the weight of their healing, resentment will likely build up. You may feel unappreciated, drained, or even taken advantage of. The more you invest in someone else's emotional journey, the less energy you have for your own growth. Ultimately, you may begin to feel that you are losing yourself in the process. This resentment doesn't necessarily mean you no longer care for the person. It simply means that your emotional resources are being depleted, and it's time to refocus on your own needs. By releasing the responsibility for their healing, you open up the space to focus on your own emotional health and healing. This is not selfish, it is a necessary act of self-care. The most empowering thing you can do for both yourself and the narcissistic person is to set clear and firm boundaries. Boundaries are not about controlling the other person or making them feel bad. They are about protecting your emotional space. They are a way of saying, I can be compassionate and understanding, but I will not sacrifice my well-being to fix you. By setting boundaries, you create a structure within which you can still maintain empathy for the person without enabling their dysfunction. For example, you might say, I understand that you are struggling, but I cannot tolerate being spoken to in that way. Or I'm happy to support you, but I cannot carry the emotional burden of your actions. Boundaries allow you to show up for others in a way that is healthy and sustainable. You can be there for them, offer encouragement, and express empathy, but you don't have to take responsibility for their healing. They must choose to take that journey themselves. Letting go of the idea that you must heal or fix someone is one of the most liberating steps in any relationship, especially with narcissistic individuals. It's a form of acceptance not of their behavior, but of the reality that you are not in control of their healing process. This acceptance doesn't mean giving up on the person or losing empathy. It simply means acknowledging that their path is their own, and you can only control how you respond. By releasing this burden, you free yourself to focus on your own healing, your own growth, and your own emotional needs. You are allowed to live your life without carrying the weight of another person's emotional struggles. By understanding that you are not responsible for their healing, you empower both yourself and them. You free yourself from the emotional burden of trying to change someone else, and you create space for them to take ownership of their own growth. This is a healthy, balanced approach that allows you to move forward with compassion, strength, and the recognition that your emotional health is just as important as anyone else's. Let me know if you'd like further elaboration or adjustments. As we navigate relationships with narcissistic individuals, it's crucial to remember that compassion, boundaries, and self-care are not contradictory, they are complementary. Compassion allows us to understand, to empathize, and to care for others, but it does not mean tolerating behavior that undermines our own well-being. Boundaries are a form of kindness to both ourselves and the people around us, reminding us that we deserve respect, space, and love just as much as anyone else. And most importantly, we must recognize that we are not responsible for the healing of others, no matter how deeply we may care for them. Healing is a deeply personal journey, one that each individual must choose to take for themselves. We can offer support, empathy, and understanding, but we cannot carry the weight of someone else's emotional growth. By releasing that responsibility, we not only protect ourselves from burnout and resentment, but we also give others the opportunity to own their healing and growth in their own time. So as you move forward, I invite you to honor your own emotional needs, protect your peace, set boundaries with love, and remember that your worth is not tied to someone else's ability to change. You deserve a life filled with respect, kindness, and authenticity. And in honoring yourself, you allow room for healthier, more balanced relationships, whether with narcissistic individuals or anyone else in your life. May you walk forward with the strength to protect your boundaries, the compassion to release the weight of others' healing, and the wisdom to embrace the journey of healing and growth that is yours and yours alone. Thank you.